Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us again from around the world, despite the time difference, for the third day of the sixth workshop on international labor migration statistics in the Asia and Pacific region. My name is Tim Thompson. I will be today's moderator. Before we begin today's session, one thing I'd like to highlight is to make sure you keep your audio muted when you are not speaking, but keep your video on throughout this workshop. This should actually be the default setting when you enter the Zoom meeting room, so please keep this setting until you need to speak during the meeting. And if you have any questions or need any help regarding participation in this workshop, please send a message to the moderator via the chat window. We will take care of it for you. Now, our first presenter today is Mr. Ivan Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman will provide information for session 7, developing and using administrative data sources for labor migration statistics, for about 50 minutes until 8:20 Geneva time. During this presentation, you can send your questions to me, the moderator, via the chat window, and I will invite 2 or 3 participants to take the floor in the order I receive their questions. Q&A will last for about 10 minutes, and any remaining questions will be addressed on the website. With that, let me invite Mr. Hoffman to begin.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. My name is Ivan Hoffman. I like to call myself a toolmaker for labor and migration statistics, having had experience from Statistics Norway, the Bureau of Statistics at the International Labour Office, and from the Directorate of Immigration in Norway. And in this presentation, I will go through the administrative data systems, what the issues are and what the possibilities are. My first experience with administrative data system registrations was about 40 years ago, when I first was appointed head of employment statistics section in Statistics Norway, and we had requested all the police districts in Norway to send us statistics on their registrations of foreign workers in the district. 2 weeks after this request had been sent out, I received a telephone call from a lady in the southern part of Norway who said that this was ridiculous because the registrations that they had were absolutely no use for statistics. The main problem was that people who had registered when they arrived in the district, they never told the district when they left. So they had a lot of non-present foreign workers on their records. Having described this to my superiors, we decided not to produce these statistics because they were highly misleading. And 3 months later, I received a report from Sweden, having produced the same type of statistics as we had intended to produce. And they had a warning on the first page saying that these statistics are highly unreliable for the same reason as in Norway. But they still had to produce the statistics on that basis because that was the legal requirement. So I use this as an example of how decision making is a little difficult. It's a little different in Norway and in Sweden. Slightly less bureaucratic in Norway, I think. The main elements in my presentation is I'll first go through some of the general features of administrative data systems, and then I will talk about the possibilities that are for using administrative data systems as a basis for statistics on international labor migration. And I apologize for not knowing enough about the administrative data systems in the countries participating in this webinar. But having visited Georgia and Azerbaijan some years ago, I must admit that I do not know the current status even in those countries. And my last point will be on talking a little bit about the characteristics that are describing migrant workers, because this is an issue that I feel has been ignored in many of the discussions on how to get statistics on international migrant workers. What are then the administrative data sources? These are sets of registrations made and stored to support and document administrative decisions and to monitor what happens. And they are intended to support the implementation of the legislation and the regulations that are being administered. They are not initially created to generate statistics. Registrations may be of structured information, coded, or it may be just scanned documents. They are usually managed and owned by the agencies responsible for implementing the relevant legislation, and the agency may process and store the registration centrally or decentrally, as my example from Norway 40 years ago illustrated. And the registration may be available throughout the case processing period or only at the end of the process. They cover events, situations, and units known to those responsible for making the primary purpose is to document individual events or decisions, and these events and decisions, how they are related to the regulations. They are stored and used, hopefully, to respect the involved unit's right to privacy. They are stored to facilitate retrieving records related to individual events and decisions, which means that if there are mistakes being registered, they are normally being spotted and corrected as they are being accessed as individual observations. So mistakes, when you are extracting the information for a whole set of decisions, it may be difficult to spot where any mistakes are being made. But that is normally not an important problem when you are extracting individual records to examine them. The characteristics that are registered for events and decisions are those deemed relevant. Firstly, for a reliable identification of the relevant units, individuals, even if they are not directly relevant for making a decision. And secondly, those characteristics which document and make it possible to understand the decisions that have been made. For example, acceptance or a rejection or an application. Those characteristics that do not serve the purpose for making them may not be registered at all, even if they are requested. And if registered, they may be registered inadequately or incorrectly. And this is an important concern that one should be aware of. The reporting process is important, obviously. The information becomes available because it's provided with an application. It's linked to an observed event. It's provided according to legal obligation with possible future benefits if correctly, and sanctions if it's not correct. And this is one important part of the administrative process, is to verify whether or not the information is correct, especially those characteristics which are used to determine the identity of the individual or the unit that is being concerned with the process. This means that the understanding of the basis for the mechanics of and the incentives linked to the reporting process is needed for understanding the statistics and the quality of the statistics that may be produced. The registration process in itself is important. Only the information needed for the objectives of the process is important, and it depends, and the registration process depends on the capacity of the administrative system and how it responds to variation in the volume of work for timeliness and correctness. There's many examples that a sudden surge in the number of applications, for example, may mean a delay in the registration process, and therefore also that statistics that normally are available within a month or a year may be delayed for a long time. And variations in the registrations as a consequence of variation in capacity or workload may have serious consequences for the statistics, especially the statistics on changes. But such statistics are frequently of keen interest to the users of the statistics. Are the number of applications for asylum increasing or decreasing, for example? The answer to that question is, of course, a consequence dependent on whether or not the capacity of the agency to process the applications has been is stable, or whether it is being influenced by surges and declines in the number of applications. The data quality of administrations to support are dependent on how they are used to support the implementation of laws and regulations. The administrative situations cover the population covered by the relevant regulations. Is this the population of interest for statistics to be used for description and analysis? Is a key question. The definitions and value sets reflect the criterion used to make administrative decisions. If the educational attainment of applicant is not relevant for making a decision, then of course the registration of the educational attainment may not be very precise, even if it's been requested on the application form. And so character is not deemed important for identifying the unit or the person, or for making a correct decision, may not be registered completely or correctly. This is another important concern. One concern which is sometimes ignored is how the registrations are stored. Are they stored as documents scanned or as structured coded information? Are the standard information structure in the system tend to reflect requirements that follow from the registrations and rules? Some characteristics are easy to store electronically as structured or coded information, such as dates of birth, date of applications, dates of observations when the decisions were made, the sex, marital status, and place of residence and citizenship are typically structured, but other important types of information, at least important for understanding the decisions, may be stored only as text and very difficult to retrieve for statistics. It's also important to understand whether the information concerning a specific event or case include information which makes it possible to link together the information of several events or cases which concerns the same units, the same individuals, or the same establishments. This is important to see whether the number of decisions during a particular reference period concerns different individuals or the same individuals having made an application or a new application several times during that period. So having a possibility whether or not the system allows for linking several stages in the process or the decisions made by several agencies on the same individuals is very important to understand for the type of statistics that may be produced. So to understand the possibility for and the quality of statistics from the registrations, it is necessary to know how the information has been reported, registered, and stored, as well as the variations in the capacity of the responsible agency. And this understanding has to be detailed and updated. It's not sufficient to understand that, the rules for registrations. It's necessary to understand how the registrations have been made in practice. In one administrative system which I was responsible for producing statistics from, the rule was that events should be reported within a week. And this was hirings and separations of workers with employers. We examined what happened to the total number of people who had been registered as being employees. And we found that, for example, on the 1st of February, we could see that the number was, a particular number was a month later was one number. If we took the statistics for the same reference date, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months later, we got different numbers. The numbers first increased for the same reference date and then decreased because the reports on hirings came in faster than the reports on the separations from employment. So it was decided that these statistics could not be used for monitoring short-term economic changes, as the head of the Statistics Norway had hoped. So let's move on then to statistics for international labor migration and migrants. We can see looking at the movements of immigrant workers during a reference period, the first suggestion is to look at the records of recruitment agents. If recruitment agents have to have authorization, the terms of that authorization can be that the agents have to keep good records of those being recruited and sent to employment elsewhere. This is of interest not only for statistics, but also for the agents themselves, if they have to recall workers and help workers to escape from areas of conflict where they have been working, as we saw during the Gulf War some years ago. I do not know that recruitment agents have been required to keep such records, but this should be one possibility for governments, agencies to look into. More realistically is the records of issued work permits, as well as other types of residence permits that permit the holder to be employed. It is important to capture both immigrant workers as such, those being admitted as workers, and the potential working immigrants. In Norway, we have many examples of successful foreign workers who were admitted as family members or as students initially, or as refugees. And we also have to look, we may also look at the registrations of new hirings, for example, as reported to Social Security administrations, and registrations of self-employed workers reported to tax authorities, if and provided that such registrations do indicate whether or not the person is a citizen or not. And of course, we have the border registrations. Some countries have now instituted very effective border registrations, but again, for both people moving into and out of the country. However, this only works for international labor migration if the registrations include both whether or not it is a citizen or not, and whether or not it is related to employment. On the immigration of workers, it's more or less a parallel possibilities, records of immigration permits granted, records of deregistrations from some of the systems that register people arriving, and dates of expiration of permits granted may also be used for calculating people who have had to emigrate. Again, border registrations may also be a possibility. All these possibilities needs to be examined for potential, what they can provide potentially, whether or not that is acceptable, and whether or not the coverage in terms of the type of workers being covered correspond to what are the priorities for the authorities to know. Some types of workers may be less of interest to have good statistics. For example, the concern may mainly be the highly skilled workers rather than with all workers. And one last issue which I was working with when I was with the Directorate of Immigration in Norway is the statistics that describes the regulation process. There is a keen interest in many aspects. How does the regulation works in practice? Who are being admitted, who are not, who applications are being rejected, and what type of employers are affected by the regulations. Maybe a keen interest for the politicians as well as for the public. One can also look at the population registration system, if that exists, on tax and social security and health registers. Many of those registrations do include information about the citizenship or the origin of the people being registered, but many of them are being excluded, do not have that. So they must be considered, but they may not be realistic alternatives. Most of these systems are constructed such that the reporting to them are such that the deregistrations are less likely to be complete than the actual initial registrations. For example, in the Norwegian population register, they have to remove administratively many people from the registered because they never reported that they left the country. This is possible if you find that there has been no sign of activity within the country for a considerable period. But these issues have to be looked closely into if you are considering to using such registers as a basis for statistics of migrant workers as well as migrations and migrants more generally. We can also look at all entries or relevance permits granted over a period and accumulate them and look at but this is also a very uncertain source for statistics that we are concerned with. Then we also should be concerned with whether they will provide information on the characteristics of the units that we are concerned with. For example, the immigration and the immigration status, the demographic characteristics of the workers or the migrants, the work experience with which they come, and if that may be registered, if it's of interest or important for providing a permit, the education attained in the home country, the type of job in the host country, the type of employer, the type of contractual situation, and wages income gained in the host country, as well as the recruitment and repatriation costs. All these characteristics have been listed as being of interest. Obviously, you need to understand whether or not they are relevant for the policies and the discussions in your country to see how important they are in the particular situation. And then I have one screen on the regulation of international labor migration. Why should we be concerned with the regulation of labor migration? Well, it is to monitor the effectiveness of the implementation of these regulations, how they affect different groups and of potential labor migrants and of working migrants and employers. And we should be concerned with the number of applications and decisions, as well as their legal basis and the case processing times. It is very important both for the employers and for the workers, obviously. If they have to wait several months for a case to be processed, that may mean that the whole process may find the workers and the employers may find it very stressful to have to wait for a long time. When I was in the Directorate of Immigration in Norway, we had to report every month to the ministry on the case processing times and all the number of decisions being made, both with work permits as well as with other applications for permission. So we should also be concerned with the definitions and value sets that are registered for the characteristics, because we need to understand who are being affected, and we need to be able, or would like to be able, to link the statistics on migrant workers to other parts of labor statistics in the country, whether it's a country of origin or whether it's a host country. The immigration and immigration status in an administrative system is defined by the national legislation, not by the statistical recommendations. The demographic characteristics and the countries of origin and receiving countries are normally coded in a way which is consistent with UN recommendations. Occupation is normally reflecting the relevant legislation, not consistent with ISCO. Industry is also the same with industry, not consistent with ISIC normally. The contractual situation is also normally reflecting a relevant legislation for immigration or emigration, not consistent with ILO recommendations on contractual or status and employment. And educational attainment, normally reflecting relevant legislation, if recorded at all, not consistent with ISCED, and I would like to note that ISCED is a classification of current educational systems, whereas the workers have been trained in many countries at many different times under different educational regimes, and therefore it may be difficult to see whether the current situation coding is in fact relevant for the statistics of a population. Lately, it has also been concerned with getting statistics on recruitment costs. There are no international standards for how to get those statistics, but there is a report, and I've given the reference to that report on the screen, and you will return to this in a later session. So, what are my concluding remarks on the use of registrations in administrative data systems for statistics on international labor migration? The first rule is that when you are using such registration for statistics, you should know the process that have generated the registrations, as well as you would know the process when you have a pure statistical survey being used. And if you, in statistical surveys, you must also remember that when you are requesting information from establishments, their capacity to provide information depends on the characteristics of their administrative data registrations. So it's you are dependent on administrative data registrations also for statistics through many types of statistical surveys. The administrative data system registration are normally better suited for producing statistics on the immigration, on the movement of workers during a reference period than on the presence of immigration of workers or working immigrants at a defined reference date. And if you remember the review of data which was presented yesterday, you may remember that administrative sources were much more frequently used for movements or flows than for stocks and for workers present. In most countries, it is difficult to obtain reasonably good statistics on the emigration of workers, but if in your country emigration of workers is regulated and permits are needed, then it may be possible to use national statistics. But in general, a better strategy would be to contact important host countries to obtain statistics on your country's workers working abroad. It's not common to have descriptive characteristics of immigrant workers or emigrant workers in an administrative system, which are defined and classified in a way which is consistent with other labor statistics. It is an additional challenge, especially for those which are using such statistics in the conjunction with other labor statistics. And this also applies to the definition of what is immigration and emigration in that system, and it's being dependent on the relevant legislation and regulations being administered. So thank you for your attention, and you may of course address any questions that you may have both to the organizers of this session and to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. We have an open chat window right now, so if you have a question or comment, go ahead and put something in there and I'll make sure to give you the floor. We have plenty of time, so if you want to put something in, I will keep mine. There we go. All right, so the first question I have is from Ms. Rosell. Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for this excellent presentation and really covering all the history. And we know that it's really administrative records are very important, especially if you are dealing with the migration issue, especially labor migration. And we also know that every country has records. Somehow they are keeping the records. But as you remember, you are also a member of our working group on labor migration statistics, where we discussed this issue. This is the weakest part of the statistics. And you also refer to the recruitment agencies in your slide number 9, I suppose. You mentioned the importance of the recruitment agencies. This is also important for the measurement of recruitment costs covered by the SDG 10.7.1. So in developing countries, those recruitment agencies are not really recorded as such. So it's really difficult to reach them because they don't have the NSOs, they don't have a list of these agencies. And sometimes, in most cases, they are working, how shall I say, informally. So do you have any idea how this can be covered, or should we, pay attention this issue as well to make effort to cover this not registered agencies in quote? Thank you.
Thank you, Haki, for this question. And I do not think that I'm qualified to answer you in a very constructive way. Coming from very rich countries, their recruitment for working abroad is not a major concern, or maybe it should be, but it's not at the moment. So I have no direct experience on how to generate list of recruitment agencies, or even how to make sure that recruitment agencies are regulated in a way which also make it possible to ensure that they keep good records of the workers that they have recruited to potentially dangerous areas, which may necessitate that they are being helped to, the workers are being helped to return to the countries of origin. Now, I have a feeling that the participants in this workshop working in countries that are important, their working abroad is an important element of their labor markets, are better placed to provide advice on how to identify and register and regulate recruitment agencies than I would. But obviously, this is a function of the effectiveness of the regulation of immigration and immigration. My guess is that countries like the Philippines, Thailand, and some other of the important exporting countries of workers may be in a position to share the experience with regulating recruitment agents. Obviously, it may be easier for some types of workers where the formalities are more in place for recruitment than for other types of workers. But I'm afraid that this is something where I just see that there is a potential there, but I do not have any practical experience on which to draw.
Okay, I also have a question from Mr. Kim from Korea Statistics. Be sure to unmute your microphone. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Better, yes.
Yes. All right. First, I'm sorry for being late because I had a class. But and thanks for Mr. Hoffman for a great presentation, and all of you for participating in this conference. So I have a quick question to Mr. Hoffman. As far as I know, you mentioned about using administrative data for labor statistics, right? Labor migration statistics. But to my knowledge, is that the data would be different depending on who collects the data, right? That means across countries and also within in a single country, across different agencies, they may say they may produce different numbers for one single flow, right? Then that means data inconsistency problem would be a big challenge to migration statistics. So maybe I missed, you mentioned it, but I missed it. But would you please explain a little bit more about ways to harmonize or to decrease data inconsistencies in labor migration statistics?
Thank you for this question, which is extremely difficult to answer in a coherent way. Consistency, I'm not quite sure what you mean by consistency. Internally in a country, you may want to have consistency between different types of sources. For example, between the labor force survey results and the results from an administrative system. There you have many sources of inconsistency, such as definitions, timing of the data collection, the process through which the data are being collected and stored and coded. So even within the country, it's difficult to find a way to have consistency in the numbers which seemingly should be on the same phenomenon. I suspect that Farhad Mehrand later tomorrow may be addressing this issue to some extent. Then you have the issue of consistency between statistics on people leaving a country for another, for a host country, and statistics in that host country which describes who have arrived from the country of origin. There have been several efforts to look at the possibilities within Europe of creating statistics on emigration from country A to country B by looking at the statistics on arrivals in country B from country A, and significant differences have been observed in such statistics, even though both the reference period and the countries of origin and the host countries should be consistent with each other. So it's very difficult to understand unless you understand the whole process of migration, the incentives of being reported correctly, or having correct registrations. It is very difficult to understand what the origin of differences are. There are no easy solutions, I think, unless you have a universal migration recording system which covers all countries, and that is, of course, entirely utopian and I suspect not very desirable from other perspectives than just statistics. So, but you also have issues of consistencies in the characteristics that are being recorded of the migrants. There are many reports on how people are being admitted to working in a country as skilled workers or unskilled workers, for example, but then you see what kind of work they are actually performing in the host countries. You see that they are, in fact, doing work which are quite different from basis on which they were admitted. This may be because the employers have given incorrect information, or because the workers themselves found it convenient not to tell that you were a skilled accountant when you applied for permit to work as a gardener, for example. I have also been visiting a country where the regulations was that you could only hire a foreign worker if you hired a native worker, the employer. And there was a business in natives renting out their identity number to employers, so that not because they wanted to work for that employer, but because the employer wanted to hire foreign workers, and therefore they could get a much higher number of native workers recorded in the administrative system than what was really the situation. There are many issues of this kind which is known to the officers in charge of working with the systems, but which they cannot, for many reasons, let influence the statistics that are being produced from the registration of the administration. So, as I said, knowing the whole process, not just the rules and regulations, is necessary to understand how well you can use the administrative registrations for meaningful statistics.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Hoffman. That will conclude Mr. Hoffman's session. I thank him and I thank the participants for the 2 questions. Moving on, next in session 8, we will have administrative data sources on international labor migration, the country case studies. We'll have 20 minutes per country in the order of Korea and then Turkey and then Armenia. Each country can be asked 1 question if you're trying to clarify something, but otherwise we will have a more thorough Q&A session for all the countries when they have finished. During the presentations, feel free to send me a question in the chat window at any time, and I will put notes here and give you a time to ask at the end. Mr. Lim from Korea will be speaking in Korean, so you'll hear a female interpreter's voice. Don't be surprised. He has not been breathing helium. Don't worry. With that, let me first invite now Mr. Young-in Lim, Deputy Director, Population Census Division of Statistics Korea, to take the floor.
So this is the overview of 2015 census in Korea. Population census was started in 2025, and housing census, its first round was in 1960. And the legal basis is the Statistics Act of Korea. And until 2015, we did this survey every 5 years. And the reference date was November 1st. And also for 2020 census, the reference date would be November 1st. That's our plan again. And before that, internet survey will begin from tomorrow. And for your reference, in 2015, internet response rate was 48.6%. And for other households, enumerators visited those households. And in 2015, for the items that we can refer to administrative data, we used register-based census. For example, age, gender, household types. On the other hand, commute, childcare, and for other items, we performed a sample survey because this data is difficult to get or obtain from administrative data. So sample survey accounted for 20% of the items. This is the life cycle of 2020 census. Between 2016 and 2018, register-based census was performed. And in 2019, address canvassing was performed. All the housing units were checked. And based on that, sample survey will be performed for 20% in 2020. And we are going to perform register-based census at the same time. So every 5 years, we perform register-based census and sample survey at the same time. So this is the multimodal survey. Now let me move on to register-based census implementation. We planned register-based census in 2008. And we studied about the methodologies with the academia. We did trial tests in order to come up with the most effective methodology. And in 2016, we published results on 2015 register-based census. And we are publishing the results every year. And about 2019 register-based census, the results were also published in August 2020. These are the key prerequisites for register-based census. First, we need to have nationwide administrative data available in place. Resident registration data, family relations registration data, foreign registration data, and building register. These are really important data sources. And in order to match between different data, we need to have a link key. For population, the link key or matching key is resident registration number. For the individuals without this data, name and birth date are used. And for housing survey, we utilize these addresses for matching purpose. And based on this effort, we convert administrative data into statistical data. And then we publish the results. And as you understand, because this is administrative data, it is really important to protect privacy or personal data. And we did SWOT analysis for register-based census. So these are SO strategies, which is collecting administrative data. And WO strategy was standardizing and coding the data. ST strategy is about producing the census data by using administrative data. And WT strategy is getting public approval and protecting personal data. So these are the 4 strategies we are implementing for 2015 census. This is the overflow chart of register-based census. For population, we have Koreans and foreigners. And For Koreans, we utilize resident register and also entry-exit data, and we compare between the two sets of data so that we can come up with a resident population. Likewise, for foreigner population, we look into foreigner register and entry and exit data, compare between the two data sets to come up with foreigner resident population. And then we also look into family relations register to generate household data. And we also look at the data sets of dormitory facilities register, social institutions register, army register, so that we can come up with accurate household data. If you look at the right side, that is about household census, we have building register, and other existing census data to come up with the statistics data. And as I mentioned earlier, we do address canvassing in order to supplement the data. This is the production process of register-based census. First, we obtain 25 data sets from 14 agencies. And we also get academic data from 400 universities and colleges. However, these data sets have different structures, so it is really important to standardize them and also coding them. And with this standardized data, we'll link different data sets. As I mentioned earlier, the link key would be a resident registration number for individuals. And then we compile statistics. So what is important here is how to effectively convert into statistics data. I personally matched the 2010 census data with administrative data to see the gap. We looked at the characteristics of census data and administrative data to come up with the ideas to supplement our methodology. So we utilize those complementary logic in order to achieve effective conversion into statistics. And then we provide the results. These are 25 types of registered administrative data. For Korean population, we use resident registration register. And for foreigner population, we utilize a foreigner register. And also, residence registration of Koreans with foreign citizenship. And also, register of undocumented short-stay immigrants, and nationality acquisition register. So these are the sources for foreigner population. And there are also other sets of administrative data for actual residence update. In the case of entry and departure register, we can use it both for Koreans and foreigners. Family relations register, army register, these are the data sources when we use for household information And those highlighted in red, these are especially important for foreigner population. So let me now move on to foreign population data production. If you look at the data of 2005 and 2010, you can see the census result and administrative data and the difference between the two. So the difference ratio in 2005 was 46.5% of the foreigners were actually surveyed in 2005, and only 60% of the foreigners were surveyed in 2010. So this survey ratio is really relatively low. And if you look at the ratio of registered foreigners per administrative district, it's about 60% on average. And there are many districts where only a few or a small number of foreigners are officially registered. So it is really challenging to count every individual foreigners in the field, as you can see on the slide. So this is the process how we supplement foreigner population data. First, we'll look into foreigner register and also foreign national Koreans residing in Korea. And we add those foreigners residing abroad but who are staying in Korea over 3 months. And we exclude those foreigners who left Korea or who are not residing in Korea anymore based on entry and departure data. And those foreigners who are registered belatedly, they are also added. And then we update 3 months fluctuations to come up with the final data. And based on entry and departure data, we look at how many foreigners are registered belatedly or with time gap, and we include them. And if there are foreigners who are residing in Korea and who are naturalized, then we exclude them from a foreigner population because they acquired the Korean nationality. This is how we supplement the actual dwelling data. For example, there could be individuals who are living in college dormitories or foreigners who are residing in social welfare facilities. So we upgrade their addresses to accurate ones. And for those foreigners who are married to Koreans, whenever Koreans update their residences, it is automatically updated on the administrative system, but not for foreigners. So if registered address of the foreigner married to a Korean spouse differs from that of the Korean spouse, we update that address. There are about 65,000 foreigners who had their addresses updated as a result of this effort. And if short-term staying foreigners, if they are actually staying in Korea for a long time, in many cases, we cannot find out their addresses. So for those foreigners, we do imputation. Based on nationality, gender, and age, we use probability-based alternative method, as you can see on the slide. And then these are the results of the register-based census. We used register data in 2005. So it is really difficult to compare apple to apple between 2010 and 2015 data. In 2010, we did a pilot of register-based census. So we tried to compare between 2010 traditional census and 2010 register-based census. And the gap was about 1,013,000, and for foreigners the gap was about 370,000. So what was the reason of the gap? Maybe there were a missed out population by enumerators in the field survey. And if you look at the bottom, you can see the population of nationals and foreigners between 2015 and 2019. And this is the foreigner population by nationality and stay or sojourn type. Chinese, Vietnamese, and Thai, these are major foreigners residing in Korea. And if you look at the types of stay, the lion's share is taken up by migrant workers. And also there are many overseas Koreans. And also marriage migrants, foreigners who are married to Koreans. And also foreign students. Total figures should be updated a little bit. I ask for your understanding. And we also compared with other administrative data sets. The gap with the original administrative data was 250,000. So even when they're registered, if they are not residing in Korea, that led to that gap, I think. And if you compare with international migration statistics, there's a gap with the increase or decrease between 2018 and 2019. There could be some foreigners who are born in Korea, but fundamentally, the production methodologies of the two data sets are different, and the underlying administrative data sets are also different. So these are the reasons, I think. And then I'd like to explain about how we survey foreigners in 2020 census. In 2020, we are going to use paper-based survey and also PC, smartphones, and also telephones. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, non-contact survey method is gaining more popularity and importance. So that's why we are inducing people to utilize smartphone and internet. smartphone, telephone, and tablet PC surveys are the first attempts we are making in 2020. Because of the pandemic, as I mentioned earlier, we are trying to minimize people contact. And even when enumerators need to visit people or households, they will just leave the questionnaire there, not meeting the people. And if the surveyed people use the internet, this is the screen they are going to use. If you look at the right side, actually we sent out a mail, direct mail, to introduce about this survey. Participation number is indicated on that direct mail, and the surveyed people can input that number through their smartphone or through PC, or they can use the QR code. And this is the list of 2020 enumeration items. Both for Koreans and foreigners, the same items are used. 16 items will be used for register-based census. And for sample survey, 55 items will be applied. 45 out of them, they will be obtained through a one-on-one interview. And for the remaining 10, we are going to use administrative data. So this is about the actual questionnaire. If they are going to use PC or smartphones, 5 languages are supported, including English, Chinese, Vietnamese, Russian, and Cambodian. And if they are going to use the paper-based survey, 10 languages will be supported. And this is our future plan. So this is the challenge when it comes to foreign households. We don't have the household type information. So we started to look into gender, name, and then we built up a separate relation table so that we can come up with more accurate household type. And in order to narrow the gap with the international migration data, we are analyzing differences and their causes. And for 20% field survey, foreigners will be matched with registered data to find out actual dwelling or addresses. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. Now let's move on to our representative from Turkey. Let me invite Mrs. Sarif Dilek Yilmaz, statistician from the Demography Statistics Department at the Turkish Statistical Institute, to begin. Ms. Yilmaz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. Distinguished participants, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Dilek Yilmaz, and I'm working at Demographic Statistics Department in Turkey. Now, I will try to give brief information on labor migration related statistics in Turkey. I hope that our presentation will be useful for all of you. I will share my screen. At the end of our presentation, My colleagues, Mr. Ercan Öz from Directorate General of International Labor, Mr. Tuna Kemali from Labor Force Statistics Department of Turkstat, and myself will be ready to answer your questions. I will start with the main data sources, then move to the labor migration related variables, and then finally conclude with some actual figures. And I will try to complete my presentation in 20 minutes. Sorry. First data source, I will start with population censuses. In my country, a total of 14 traditional censuses were conducted between 1927 and 2000. After establishment of our population registration system, namely ABPRS, basic population figures were started to be compiled from this system. And this system was also used as the basis for the first census conducted with combined method in 2011. When we move to the surveys, unfortunately, neither migration-specific surveys nor ad hoc modules in regular household surveys are conducted in Turkey. But on the other hand, LFS has a considerable time series in my country. The main objective of LFS is to obtain information on the structure of the labor market in Turkey. We apply regular application since 1988 in line with international norms and standards. All settlements in my country have been covered in the sample selection, and sampling units, addresses, and surveys apply to all individuals living in the households. And it's a continuous survey with quarterly 85,000 and annually 232,000 households. And we publish monthly press releases and annual regional results. On migration, we have three variables in LFS: nationality, place of birth, and ever resided abroad. We submit microdata to Eurostat covering place of birth and year of residence in the country and region of residence 1 year before the survey. I mean, we cover place of birth, previously living in another country, but we do not cover nationality. And I will try to explain why we do not cover. The information about the individual surveyed is expanded with weight coefficients for estimations to give the total population in LFS. Within the scope of the definition of households, surveys conducted with foreigners living or intending to reside in the sample address for 20 months or over. Our ABPRS, which uses both the sample address framework and the demographic structure of the population, is used in LFS. In ABPRS, the Syrians under temporary protection are not fully covered. So there is under coverage of the Syrians under temporary protection. Since the total coefficients used in the weighting of foreign individuals cannot reflect the actual structure, the indicators in the nationality detail cannot be published. And as for the administrative registers, first I would like to explain ABPRS, which is used to produce annual population statistics. The foreign registers in the system is annually updated with some administrative registers covering work permits and residence permits. We have a good collaboration with our stakeholders and always appreciate their continuous efforts. Since its establishment in 2007, not only the quality but also the diversity of the registers have been improved. Within the concept of migration, we introduced country of citizenship variable in 2012, country of birth in 2014, annual immigration and immigration flows in 2016, and finally, first year of residence for the foreigners in 2018. When we move to the work permits, I would like to give brief information. Applications for work permits for foreigners residing in Turkey directly relate to the Family, Labor and Social Services Ministry. Work permit applications are made by employers. During the application, the foreigner's personal information, occupational information, social security information, tax information are collected online from the relevant institutions. Employer information is also collected online from relevant institutions. If there is any change in this information, the records are updated automatically. Foreigners abroad are required to apply for a work permit through Turkish diplomatic missions. First registration is done here. Foreign person information is transmitted online to the Ministry of Family, Labor and Social Services. I would like to summarize the data sources in this I mentioned before in this slide. In the columns, you can see our data sources. I mean, traditional censuses, labor force surveys, ABPRS, and work permits. And in the lines, you can see the groups. I mean, stock population, migration flows, and labor force. I will start. I will try to start with the traditional censuses. In the censuses, we can cross country of birth, country of citizenship, and 5 years migration with labor force indicators. When we move to the labor force survey, we can only cross country of birth with the labor force indicators. And now ABPRS, we don't have labor force indicators in our system, so we have every migration related variables including this in our system: country of birth, country of citizenship, 1 year country of residence 1 year prior, but we don't have labor force indicators to cross. And for work permits, because of its nature, we have only registers of foreigners, so we can tabulate country in labor force indicators with country of citizenship. And what we are doing now in my department, we have plans for 2021 population and housing census. And I mentioned in my very first slide that we used ABPRS in our previous census, and we applied combined method. Now we change the method from combined to fully register based. Most of the information we need are for core variables can be obtained from our system. However, some information, including labor force, is not available in the system. And in 2018, we established a working group and started to work on the possible administrative registers to help to produce labor force indicators. And we conducted a pilot in 2019, and we have a plan for second one for these days. And I listed the data sources and for which variable we try to use. We try to use social security registers, formal registration system, tradesman information system, and data of institutional population in order to obtain employed population. For unemployed population, we try to use employment agency records. And for the group outside of labor force, we try to use as much as possible registers, data on disability, registers on students, exam registers of student selection and placement center, revenue administrative records, registers of retired persons, data of institutional population, data on social transfers, payment to the disabled group. And I will try to give some main figures, starting with labor force survey. As yesterday also we discussed the gap between the group born in Turkey and born abroad for labor force participation rate. Also, although there is a gap between these groups, the gap is decreasing over the years for labor force participation and employment rates. But it's good that labor force participation rate is increasing within the years for persons born abroad. And let me give some figures from our main population register. The size of both the size and the share of the foreigners in Turkey increased within the time. From 98,000 in 2007, it reached almost 1.5 million in 2019. And I would like to add one important thing. The Syrians and under temporary protection is not covered in this, is not included in this figures. And today it's almost 3.5 million. With the size of the foreigners, also the structure changed within the time. And you can see the population by country of citizenship, again tabulated from ABPRS. I compared 2012 with 2019. And in this slide, I put population by country of birth. And I compared 2014 to 2019. We have 4 years series for migration flow statistics, annual statistics, and we have an increasing number of net migration in this period. You can see 200,000 to 300, almost 350,000 we reached. And finally, I would like to give some figures from work permit statistics. They also increased within the time. Both number of applications and also number of permits reached almost hundreds of hundreds thousands from 10,000. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Yilmaz. Appreciate that presentation. And of course, I do see Mr. Hoffman's question, which we will address after the third session. Go ahead and put your questions in there to get them in line. Next, let me invite Mr. Garik Sakanyan, the Deputy Head of State Employment Agency, Ministry of Labor and Social Issues of Armenia, to begin his presentation. Go ahead, Mr. Sakan.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Nice to see you, all of you. And let me to share my presentation. Is it okay?
We can't see
No.
yet. Can you share your presentation with us?
I couldn't understand why it's not.
There we go.
I think now it's okay, yes?
It's working. Let's go.
Okay. I will briefly introduce the structure of a work permit and what kind of administrative data are existing in Armenia. Just shortly, I will mention that what kind of legislation are working regarding to the work permit. It's a constitution, international law, labor code, labor about the law and foreigners, and the government decree how is the procedure of giving the work permit, and other legal acts. Oh. Okay, I will stay on this stage and just mention that every employer which is working in Armenia should have the work permit to sign the contract with the foreigners, and proceeding of the work permit, the authorized body of employment is taking account the needs and developments of the labor market of Armenia. It's a short procedure of how is working the procedure of the work permit, and based on that you will understand what kind of data are existing in our database. Look, the first stage is submitting the vacancy description form. It's there is some data regarding to the employment type of employment, salary, and what kind of economic sectors are working this employee. The second one stage is the matching the unemployment from the unemployment rate, unemployment database, but not only from unemployment, and even though from job seekers database. The third phase is the submitting the necessary documents for the specific foreigner. Next one is a work permit approval or rejection. And the next one will be the signing employment contract and submitting the contract and monitoring and evaluation. This is the whole, how to say, scheme of giving work permit. Now about statistics. I make some analysis and which will show you what kind of data are existing in Armenia. This is the distribution by sectors, and you can see that the huge amount is workers, foreigners. They are working in tourism sector, hotel service industry, restaurants, and entertainment. And the third sector is education. But we will take in your mind that even though it's a sector, so we have type of the employee which have already work permits for certain workers. This page is showing what kind of qualifications have the workers. You can see that approximately 46% foreigners are working with non-qualified positions. It does not mean that the person has or no qualification, but it means that the person is working on non-qualified qualification position. And look at the 40% is working on the vocational qualification positions, and 14 are working in high qualified positions. At the same time, we have the information about the foreign labor force and their education and from side of qualification. All this information we have, and it doesn't matter. They are working qualified positions or non-qualified. It means that we have all information about educational levels of foreigners, and in the future we will use this information for developing our economy and to use them, of course. The next page is showing in which countries there are foreigners. And the first is the Indian people. Last 2 years, it's increasing. Just this year is stoppage based on the COVID-19. And the second country is Iran, then Ukraine, Georgia, and others. This is about sex and age. You can see that 73% approximately they are male, and they are in the middle age. 67% of foreigners are about from 18 to 35 years old. This page is distributing the foreigners working in which regions. You can see that the huge amount, 57% are working just in capital in Yerevan, and others, approximately 6.5%, they are working nearby Yerevan. There are two regions, Kotayk and Armavir. It's all. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Sarakian. Okay, so now we can open the floor for a Q&A session. I do have one question in the queue. The first question was from Mr. Hoffman, apparently to our Korean presenter. We need you to unmute, Mr. Hoffman, if you're going to ask the question, please. Go ahead and unmute your microphone.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't understand from the presentation how the economic characteristics of the foreigners were, and even Koreans were captured through the administrative registration system. So if you could please elaborate on the economic characteristics, employment in particular, and as well as occupation and industry. Thank you.
When it comes to economic activities, we are not utilizing administrative data to the fullest. We are reviewing a variety of administrative data sources. So going forward, So we are not perfect in gathering and utilizing administrative data. So for economic activities and characteristics you asked about, we are going to include that information in census. However, we are not doing that right now. We are doing 20% of the sample survey for that economic activity or economic characteristics information.
I hope that was
Thank
clear.
you.
Okay, I see a question for Mr. Sakyan. Go ahead, Mr. Kim.
Yes. Thanks for your presentation, and nice to meet you again, even though it is online. All right. I hope you. Doing well. I have a question for you. As far as I know, Armenia is one of the countries that had great, improvements in data collection effort. To my understanding, I think your country is one of the outstanding country. So would you please share your experiences, how you improved your quality of the data, and what kind of efforts have you ever put into your data collection, the migration data collection? I think it would be helpful for other countries by sharing your experiences and how you deal with the difficult issues when you collect data. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you very much for the remarks and evaluation of our work. It's nice to see you again. And for my opinion, it's the first that I can mention. It's a cooperation with the other administrative or authorities, and to collect the information just together. And for example, we have some data which is not how to say acceptable for the police or for tax service, etc. But we found out, and now we are on the stage to regulate and to find what kind of data we should collect and which authority should collect the certain data. This is, I think, the main issue. And the second one is that we are improving and collecting more and more data, and we are clarifying what kind of data in which format we should to collect for analyzing, for showing the real picture. I think this is the main two reasons and aspects which is helpfully can use everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Now for the second day in the row, I get to say Rakatonarivo. So Ms. Rakatonarivo, would you like to ask some questions to the speakers?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, dear speakers, for very informative presentations. So I have a question first for Mr. Lim, and it's a quick clarification question, just to know how the registration and the registration into the foreigner register works in practice, meaning that at which level is that registration done? How and when, just on the arrival of the foreigner in the country, or do the foreigner have to declare himself regularly to the administration, just to understand a little bit how this register is updated and how it works. And then a second question, in one of your slides, you were comparing the results from the register-based census to some international migration statistics, and there was some differences that you showed. But could you please just clarify what those international migration statistics are in this table, just to understand what is the source you're comparing the information with? And then I also have a question for Mrs. Dilmaz from Turkey about the ABPRS. So it's more or less the same question, like how does this registration work? Like who must registers, where, I mean, at which level? Is it at the municipality level and then centralized? And when? So like, how is it updated? Just similar to Mr. Lim, to know how the register is updated and the accuracy of the coverage. And then you also mentioned the work permits, statistics on work permits, but I don't know if those information on work permits also fit into the information of the ABPRS, or it's something completely different, because I think I misunderstood that. And if it does, how about the accompanying family members of the people who benefits of those work permits that are delivered? And then my last question is for Mr. Sakian. So I think the statistics that you presented us in your presentation were based on the work permits administrative data source, from my understanding. And have you had the opportunity to compare those information with the LFS statistics, just to see how they compare, and if there is a gap, how it could be explained? Thank you.
답변부터 받죠. 답변, 한국 답변, Korean. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have Mr. Lim answer first.
Thank you for your questions. We look at entry and departure information because foreigners will declare themselves about their entry or departure. If they need to stay in Korea for over 3 months, they need to be officially registered. So we get that immigration data and also foreigner registration data. So we look at 2 data sources at the same time. And we are working on accuracy and coverage right now. So when they link 2 sets of data, we need to provide a unique key to individual foreigners. Passport number, their name, birth date, gender, they could be used as link keys. And we are still working on how those different link keys can be combined in order to identify, trace, and track individual foreigners. And about your second question, there was a gap between register-based census and ILMS. ILMS statistics is the flow data based on entry and departure information. And for those foreigners who are staying in Korea for over 3 months, we look at their entry and departure. And in the case of register-based census, we just look at stock data at one point of time. And we look at entry and departure data or immigration data and also foreigner registration data at the same time. And 2 sets of data have different methodologies to come up with a microdata level information. So we are still working on narrowing the gap. We are still reviewing the methodology.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lim. If we could have Ms.
답이
Yilmaz.
되었는지.
Thank you. I would like to give information about our registration system, population registration system. It's a system managed by Ministry of Interior. And every individual after entry to Turkey has to do address declaration to the related branch of Ministry of Interior. And the information, TürkStat get information simultaneously. Every day we get information updates from the system. Every year, at the end of the year, we freeze the system and work on it. because at the very early stages of the system, we learned that foreigners mostly omit to register to the system, and our population definition is register based. So we started to work on work permits and residence permits. We every year at the end of the year we get work permits and residence permits from the related institutions, and check the permits with the system, because we have PIN numbers. We don't. There is no the application problem. So we update our foreign registers with the actual residence and work permits. And if you, we have I want to share a screen. This one. Last year I presented, but this year I tried to shorten my presentation. Which group of foreigners we covered in the system I write. Here you can see foreigners holding a valid residence and work permits at the end at the reference date, or holding an identity document equivalent to residence permits with a valid address. If this group is persons international persons under international protection covers, and the last group is blue card holders. That means who have already renounced their citizenship and residing in the country with a valid address declaration. Could I answer your question?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right, and finally,
Is there
Mr.
anything I
Sarikyan.
missed?
Just maybe one point. Thank you already for your answer. So you, if my understanding is correct, so you check this work permit information against the ABPRS system to complete what's missing. And then what about the accompanying family member of those people with work permits if they are not in the system?
You can do nothing. But anyway, in the last years, we observed that most of the registers, I mean, work permit, when we check the work and resident permits, we see that persons already registered in the system. Because if you are not registered in the system, you cannot get health or health insurance, or you cannot go to school, you cannot get, you cannot go to bank. You can, I mean, it's quite difficult to survive if you don't, if you don't have a declaration.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Sarikyan.
Okay, thank you for the question, dear Nirina, and my presentation was based sure on administrative data, and compare with the LFS. Unfortunately, we have no comparative with LFS, and I hope for in the future we will do it.
Thank you.
Okay, and I see a question there from Ms. Naidu for the Turkish presenter.
Hello, everyone. Greetings from Fiji. I just have a quick question for, first of all, thank you for the presentations from Turkey, from Korea and Armenia, but I have a question only for Ms. Dilnaz from Turkey. I was going through the presentations. I have seen the migration flow statistics. I was just interested on immigration numbers because I've seen the net migration numbers, and I've noticed that you have more people coming in your country than people immigrating from your country. So what can be the major reasons for them for coming in your country? Maybe it can be for education or for better job opportunities. So maybe you can elaborate more in that. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. First of all, I think we just a moment. I would like to open the slide again. Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't open. Unfortunately, we do not have the information on reason for migration. We do not have, and we haven't yet do any analysis on why people immigrate and why people emigrate. We just have their age, their nationality, country of citizenship. We do not have their educational level, their information about occupation. We have very few numbers, but we cannot get together to produce statistics and to do analysis.
Okay, hope that answers your question. I see a question from the Korean statistics staff. Oh, sorry, it's from Armenia, so I'll read it out. The question is to Turkey. Did you face a situation where the same indicator in the same year shows an opposite direction trend in two different data sources, LFS and admin data? If yes, how can you deal with this?
I'm sorry, but I couldn't understand your question. I'm so sorry.
So one more time, or was it just a confusing
Please,
question?
one more time.
Okay, sure. So did
Maybe
you...
my colleagues can answer also.
Okay, that's fine too. Did you face a situation where the same indicator in the same year shows an opposite direction trend in two different data sources, LFS and admin data? And if yes, how did you deal with this?
Maybe I can try to answer these questions.
Okay, great.
Once again, I'm Tuna from Turkey, LFS department. If I understood correctly, the question was any indicators from different direction, LFS and the administered registers. I can say that we always check the indicators which are occur in the LFS and the administered registers. And we also use basic demographic indicators in LFS from address-based national database. So they are full linked with these two data sources. So we are really big harmonious between these data sets. I mean, survey and the address-based population database.
Okay, thank you to Ms. Kalantarian for the question. I hope that answered. If not, you can send us another message in the chat window And now we have a question from Korea. Did I hear that right?
My question goes to Turkey. Sorry, this is my comment. Yes, if there are different data in administrative data source and register data source, that is our great headache. So we look at field survey results. For example, for foreigners, there are some cases where there are some gaps. So this is my question and at the same time, my comment and question at the same time. Anyone who can add their comment?
Okay. Can I have Turkey answer first?
About foreign people, actually, we cannot publish any results by nationality from LFS. So we cannot check the difference between two sources. So as I understand correctly, for foreign people, we cannot publish so many results from LFS, just foreign borns and natives we can publish, as my colleague showed in her presentation. So we are not able to check about this issue between two sources.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Sarkan?
Is it correct? Did the question forwarded to me? No.
Okay, sorry, my mistake. I wasn't sure who was addressing it to exactly. Okay. So everyone, thank you very much for the active discussion for the final 3 sessions. Certainly you can send another question in the chat window if you wish. And I would like to conclude the sessions for today. Today we had 24 participants from 15 countries, despite the challenging time schedule. And hopefully tomorrow on the last day there'll be the same high level of enthusiasm. Of course, we apologize for all the technical issues today and appreciate your patience. We'd love to be face-to-face, but looking at the way things are going right now, doing our best to host online is always a challenge. So tomorrow we have sessions on measuring international labor migration based on a combination of data sources and discussions about the possibility of using the measurement approach that'll be presented in session 9. The meeting will resume at the same time using the same Zoom link as today. Please do your best to be punctual, even if it's very early in the morning. Thank you very much for joining us today, and see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
See you tomorrow. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Bye bye. Bye bye.
Merci.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Goodbye.